This is BBC World News. I'm Regid Ahmed. Our top stories. President Trump's national security advisor accuses the Syrian government of using chemical weapons and demands action from global leaders.
It is time for all nations to hold the Syrian regime and its sponsors accountable for their actions.
Meddling allegations anger Moscow after the FBI charges 13 Russians with interfering in the US election. The killer of a 6-year-old girl in Pakistan is sentenced to death for her rape and murder. The family of Zainab Ansari welcomed the verdict.
We are satisfied with this verdict of the death sentence, but our next demand is that he should be punished and hanged publicly.
Also in the programme, can you see anything unusual about this Picasso? We'll uncover the mystery hiding behind the masterpiece. Hello and welcome to BBC World News. President Trump's national security advisor has called on world leaders to hold the Syrian government to account for its continued use of chemical weapons. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, HR McMaster says it's clear that such weapons are still being deployed by the Assad regime. Well, tensions between Russia and the West have also been evident at the conference, with an FBI investigation on alleged Russian interference in the US presidential election still ongoing. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov took the opportunity to dismiss the accusations. Let's get more from our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, who is in Munich for us. Lise, first of all, if we can start with HR McMaster's comments on Syria, what is he proposing should be done?
Well, it's not the first time the United States and indeed other Western leaders have spoken out about charges that the Syrian government, backed by Russia, has been using chemical weapons time and again. And I spent a few weeks in Syria in January, and the allegations were there again. But every time the accusations are made, the Syrian government, Russian officials deny that they have ever used chemical weapons. So it comes down to the back and forth. If you try to get any action through the UN Security Council, it would be gridlock, with Russia taking and its allies taking one side and the United States and its allies taking the other. We saw, of course, last year in April how Trump responded to the allegations, to the evidence of an attack in Han Sheikhoun with a salvo of missile strikes. But since then, the United States has not taken any military action, but it has repeatedly warned Syria and Russia that it would not stand for this sort of action. We've heard that again today. What kind of action will be taken still remains to be seen.
So does that mean that this was just posturing from HR McMaster?
It's hard to say. This is the first time HR McMaster has been speaking here at the Munich Security Conference. Is he speaking from his own authority? Has President Trump authorized him to speak in this way? What does it mean? Is it just words? Is it just a warning salvo? Everyone here knows that the situation in Syria is already deeply complicated and very dangerous, with so many outside players already involved, with Turkish troops having invaded in the north. There's some 2,000 American soldiers on the ground. There's been Israeli strikes against Syrian and Iranian targets in the past week. So there's already a lot of tensions and wars within wars on the Syrian battlefield. Not to mention, of course, the Syrian and Russian warplanes who've been bombing in the last rebel-held province of Idlib.
Lise, on the Russian meddling issue, there were strong words from both Lavrov and HR McMaster.
Well, yes, HR McMaster said when it came to the indictments that there was now, as he put it, really incontrovertible proof that there had been Russian meddling in the U.S. Election, and he welcomed the indictment in the United States. As you heard the comment, though, from Sergei Lavrov, his trademark turns of phrases. The Russians have repeatedly said that there is no evidence of Russian meddling. They've called it evidence of Russia-phobic approach to these issues. So again, on that issue as too, you get the two sides talking past each other. But of course, the indictment in the United States is about a criminal conspiracy to meddle in the U.S. election. It takes it up another notch.
Our chief international correspondent Lise Doucette in Munich. Thank you very much for that. Our court in Pakistan has handed down 4 death sentences to a man who raped and murdered a 6-year-old girl, Zainab Ansari, last month. The trial of Imran Ali inside a prison in Lahore lasted a matter of days. The girl's family has called for her killer to be publicly hanged. He's also been linked to the assault or murder of a number of other young girls. Our correspondent Secunda Kamani has been following the case from Islamabad. Well, let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news now. The Vice-Chancellor of the University of Zimbabwe has been arrested in connection with the controversial awarding of a doctorate to the former First Lady. Grace Mugabe was awarded the degree in 2014 after studying for just a few months, despite it normally taking several years to gain the qualification. Her thesis was only published last month after calls for her to be stripped of the PhD. Suicide bombers in northeast Nigeria have killed at least 17 people in an attack at a fish market. According to security forces, 2 people took part in the attack in the town of Konduga, about 25 kilometres south of Maiduguri. More than 50 others were injured, and although militants from Boko Haram are being blamed, the group has not claimed responsibility. The credit ratings agency Fitch says it's upgraded Greece because of its growing economy and increased political stability. The development is welcome news for the country, which has suffered years of austerity. US President Donald Trump has met survivors of Wednesday's high school gun attack in Florida, in which 17 people were killed. During visits to a hospital and a sheriff's office, the president praised emergency workers for their response, describing the shooting as very sad. Barbara Plett-Usher reports. Well, stay with us on BBC World News. Still to come, we'll be checking in at the Winter Olympics and the Czech snowboarder who won gold on borrowed skis. This is BBC World News, the latest headlines. President Trump's national security advisor has told a conference that it's time the world held Syria to account for using chemical weapons. The court in Pakistan sentences a man to death for the rape and murder of a 6-year-old girl last month in Pakistan. Well, taking you back to this weekend's security conference in Munich, where the British Prime Minister Theresa May has been making the case for how future security cooperation might work after Brexit. Mrs May called for a new deep and special partnership to ensure the UK and the EU can continue to work together. Mrs May says the UK's commitment to protecting Europe from threats was unconditional. The BBC's chief political correspondent Vicky Young reports. And in the last hour, members of the UK Independence Party, UKIP, which campaigned for Brexit, have voted to sack their leader, Henry Bolton. He's been in office for less than 6 months. Mr Bolton has been under pressure to resign since his ex-girlfriend sent racially offensive messages about Meghan Markle, the fiancée of Queen Elizabeth's grandson, Prince Harry. And celebrations are taking place today in Kosovo to mark 10 years since it declared independence from Serbia. The anniversary comes as Kosovo is struggling with massive unemployment and international travel restrictions. The European Union has listed the Western Balkans nation as a potential candidate for membership, but several EU states strongly oppose this.
That is all the sport. It's back to you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Now, new scanning technology has revealed a painting underneath the famous Picasso work, A Crouching Woman. The picture underneath is of the Catalan landscape, and it's thought to have been painted by a student. It seems that Picasso used the shape of the landscape as inspiration for his subject's hunched pose. The discovery has been unveiled today at an international science conference in Austin, Texas, from where our science correspondent, Palab Ghosh, reports. Well, let's just remind you of our top story before we go. The US National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, says it's time the world held the Syrian government accountable for its continued use of chemical weapons. Now, General McMaster told the Munich Security Conference that reports and photos from the war zone clearly show that weapons are being deployed, and there's much more coming out of that Munich conference as well. If you're interested in more of those lines, have a look at our website, bbc.com/news.
Hello. In a moment's news.